Hello, my fellow geeks. Welcome to the brand new edition of the Indian AvGeek. And what a show we have for you this week. It's been a monumental week in Indian aviation, and it needed a dance partner fit for that role. And we have one of the best in Sanjay Lazar, industry veteran for over 37 years in various operational and leadership roles at Air India, starting his career in 1986 as an assistant flight purser. After opting for VRS from the airline, he has been consulting as the CEO of AvGeek Consultants, and I could go on and on and on about him, but today he is here with us and I'm excited to talk to him. Welcome to the Indian AvGeek, Sanjay. Glad you could join us. The International Civil Organization, ICAO, has been auditing India's aviation security for the past few days as part of its 9-day audit, focusing on BCAS at Delhi and Kolkata airports. For those of our listeners who might not be aware of this, can you walk us through this audit and what exactly happens?
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you for having me on your podcast, and it's a pleasure to be here. The ICAO safety audit is a universal safety oversight program that the ICAO conducts all over the world with regulators. So it's not necessarily a program which if the ICAO visits your country, it means your aviation standards are bad or good or anything. It is a regular process that was established maybe in the year 1999 or 2000 for to promote global aviation safety and ensure that member states follow the basic ICAO codes which they laid in place to maintain effectively safety oversight systems. Now, as you know, ICAO is obviously a UN agency, and they've got certain standards. Okay, so it's a 4-letter standard and a classification. Essentially, what the ICAO audit entails is that there are about 18 or 19 annexures, and they follow what is known as ICAO SARPs, that is standard and recommended practices in each area of responsibility. So in each space, the regulator of that country, or whether it's an organization, have to comply with ICAO and what the member states have laid down. And India has had this earlier. There are some levels that you follow, and when a country falls below a level, then it triggers off an audit even before the normal periodicity, right? So we are currently undergoing a safety program audit, which evaluates health and safety of the working. So the entire country is, so they'll probably, and I've been through, in my days in the airline, I've been through the last ICAO audit or the one before that, five years ago at least, when they go to each member airline as well. They not only look at the regulator and the regulator's performance, but they also look at every individual airline. So let's say you have a Indigo, you have an Air India, you have an Akasa, you have a Go is of course not operating, you have a SpiceJet. So the DGCA's monitors will take the ICAO auditors to each one of these chosen airlines and then look through their systems as well. So it's quite an intense process, and it's generally done in the headquarters in Delhi. So I expect that the Indian regulator will come through with flying colors, because most of the airlines are compliant in 95%, and the auditor, the audit program of the DGCA itself has been pretty stringent over the last year. I mean, if you have a look, they've been fining airlines left, right, and center, show causing them. So let's see how it goes.
Right. I think the last audit happened in November 2022.
Possible. I'm talking about one that happened much before that, about
Okay.
3 or 4 years before that. Yeah.
Okay. That was the last audit you were a part of.
Yeah.
Right. But I was reading, I think in India, the last one happened in November 2022, and it resulted
Possible.
in India's aviation safety oversight capability ranking improving from 112th to 55th place. Um, Exactly. I think what you're saying, that DGCA seems to have its house in order, and it's been quite strict in its audits of airlines and safety measures. So that's good to know. Good news for all flyers in the country as well. Is this one more related to the how our regulator is functioning, or is this concentrating more on the airlines themselves?
I believe, since you mentioned that it is, BCAS, when the 2018 audit took place. Okay, that's quite a long time ago, actually. In the 2018 audit, there was actually not so much of good news for India. At the last audit, which I'm speaking about, I think was in 2018 odd. There was, it wasn't such great news for uh, the DGCA at that point, because we didn't really see an improvement. We actually saw a lot of findings, and one of the major findings then was that the independent status of the BCAS was not established. Okay, um, it was shown that it was part of another ministry at that time, and they were not independent, and they were not providing enough of safety oversight, is what the auditors felt at that time. So after that, I think in 2020 or 21, there's now been a bill that gives statutory status to BCAS and other regulatory bodies, allowing them to, levy fines, etc. So I believe that this would actually now help us our position in this particular audit. They largely focus, of course, on airlines, but also on the BCAS, Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. So also, I think it's going to look sharply at the airports. So that's something that we have to take in mind.
Right, got it. And it will obviously help our aviation safety standards, right? It helps keeping everybody on toes. It's all
It
good news for the flyers.
absolutely it will. Even though they tell you that they're coming to, Mumbai or Delhi, or like in this case Delhi and Kolkata, it's going to keep everyone on their toes, because number one, whether you're been a green on, or whether you're a veteran, you need to know your SOPs as they're listed out in your manual. You need to follow them, and I think this audit team has 12 auditors from 10 different countries, and they're going to focus completely on security, on aviation security, more than airline operations like it did the last time around. So this time, it's the finger is going to be purely on the government side, because BCAS comes directly under the government. So that's going to be there. I think it's a very good aspect for flyers all over the country. And I have to say, Vishal, our BCAS does a very good job of its maintaining security, despite us not having the best kind of equipment that you'd see in, let's say, JFK or EWR or Heathrow, full body scanners, and all that kind of stuff. It's still to come to India. So our guys are pretty good.
You mean in terms of training, the personnel at the airports have been, which they've been provided, they are good, or I
They're good.
guess that would have to be
Yes.
because we don't have the cutting edge equipment like you're saying.
Yes, yeah. We don't have that equipment, and despite that, we are taking in so many passengers through our, doors, and a lot of this physical manual work that our guys do is not done by, overseas security agencies. Even whether you look at Heathrow, whether you look at JFK, EWR, SFO airports, they have cutting edge equipment, like you said. They have, full body scanners, they have thermal scanners. We have none of that. We walk through DFD, door frame detectors. Our guys use, the handheld sniffers, and metal detectors, and still they manage to clear, and keep the levels above, way above, you know all other standards. So I think it's a good thing, and it'll only enhance our security. And I do believe that we need cutting edge equipment sooner or later. That's something I think the ministry has to look at.
So, Sanjay, once the auditors are done, are they in a position to recommend or strongly suggest to the authorities to buy or install new equipment? What do they usually do? What do they usually say? Do they straight away penalize you, your rankings, or do they say, you know what, your door frame scanners or your handheld equipment, that you're using is not good enough and you need to upgrade.
These auditors are also from regulatory agencies of other countries. Okay, they are nominated to the ICAO, and they come from there. So that's a very important. They are. Let's understand, these guys know their business as well, better than maybe our guys know. Secondly, what they do is, once they compile their reports in maybe one, two, three cities, or four installations, or whatever they do that, and they have a final meeting with the local host regulator, which in this case would be the DGCA, and have the BCAS in attendance as well. And they would then list out what they call our findings. A finding is a finding of fault. Okay, you call it politely finding, and then you're allowed to sit across, and your team gets back. Okay, in an airline, for example, if I was part of that audit team, or defending my airline, I would then respond, about every finding, and give a logical reasoning or whatever, and show the documentation, or the manuals, or the processes, or the SOPs. Then the auditor will look at it, and they'll decide whether they want to make it a finding or not. Once the defense is over, the findings are cleared, they come out with their eventual rating and number, not in front of you. I mean, they'd go back to the headquarters and then sit down, and probably, they've got to have a benchmark to compare it with. So they'd look at the others and then say, okay, this is the standard that we're putting it at. That's how it's done typically. You will be surprised, Vishal, if an airline is undergoing now, if you take an ISR audit, they go into, the type settings of your flight reports. If it's a paper flight report, they go into your general declaration printing. They look at minute details, and it's amazing. They come out with a bundle of findings, and your guys have got to be on the ball to reply and respond. And I think by and large in India, we've got some good guys who work in the DGCA from various airlines. That the airlines themselves nominate people to go into the as cabin safety inspectors, or as CFOI, and that team, those instructors, or the examiners teams. So those guys travel with them. Here in this case, BCAS would have nominated people who will go with them. There'll be probably ASG or a DS, I don't know what ranks, but one of the senior guys will go with this team. Absolutely. So that's how it's.
Let's move on to the other massive news of the week. Singapore Airlines finally getting the go ahead from the government of India to acquire 25.1% stake in the new airline, in the new Air India, after Air India subsumes Vistara. Vistara, of course, started its operations on my birthday of 9th January, I remember, in 2015, with a Delhi-Bombay flight, and it seems 11th November, 11/11, is the date when brand Vistara will fly into the sunset. Life has come full circle for Singapore Airlines, though. In 1998, we all know, a certain airline with 9W code lobbied hard to keep Tata and SQ out of Indian airspace. But now 9W is no more, and the Tata Singapore Airlines combine is set to make a strong second airline brand in the country. Almost 29% market share in domestic passengers. What are your first thoughts on all of this, Sanjay?
It's not, an interesting thing of the week. I'd say it's a monumental achievement. It's an epochal achievement in the history of Indian aviation. And I say this because, this has come full circle, not from 1994, 5 or 6. It's come from 1972. Okay. We go back to 1970, 68. I don't know if you know the background between Singapore Airlines and Air India, but Singapore Airlines was
Yes, yes,
once
I do.
part of Malaysian Airlines. Okay,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was the Malaysia Singapore Airlines. They split, and when they split, Singapore had little or no airline, and Lee Kuan Yew approached JRD Tata, and I'm talking of 1970-71. Though they had aircraft and they just started flying to London, they had ordered 747s which were coming in, and Air India had already ordered them, and they'd already arrived in 71. We had two already in our fleet. We had almost 30 pilots, 28 pilots trained by them. Lee Kuan Yew asked for help, and you had the first four batches of air hostesses who came to Bombay Kalina Airport and trained in the Air India mock-up. Then you had the pilots coming here, and our pilots, Air India pilots, went across there and flew and a lot for 3-year postings. So there's a lot of history between the two carriers. Then you came down to, you know, in the 1990s, when strangely, I mean, the VP Singh government's principal secretary at that time had spoken to JRD and Ratan Tata and asked them would they like to join and set up an airline in India. And that's when they got going. Unfortunately, that government fell. In the next meeting which Gochok Tong and Narasimha Rao had in 94, they broached the subject again. And Singapore was to take 60%, the Tatas 40%. There were more than 15 meetings held at a cabinet level. Okay, and this is from the history of the Tatas, which I've gleaned. It's part of one of my research documents as well. And at the final meeting, Yogesh Chandra just walked out and said he was not amenable. And Amar Singh and a whole lot of other people who were known to be close to 9W objected very strongly. Uh, then CM Ibrahim, the then minister, came up and said, Indian Airlines unions will go on strike and it'll shut down. And that got shelved. Then again in 2000, NDA coalition led by Vajpayee ji came in. And he decided to privatize a number of PSUs, Air India and Indian Airlines being two of them. There again, they had appointed, Arun Shourie was there, Montek Singh Ahluwalia. I was before that committee too, as an employee representative. And, their own government went against them. The unions of Air India and Indian Airlines at that time had made a bid. If you remember I don't know if you would, but the IPG made a bid to buy Air India themselves. And the Cabin Crew Association joined them. In the end, late Mr. Thackeray decided, nothing doing. If Tatas are taking it, it's okay. There were five specific groups who were interested in Air India at that time. Wasn't Tatas alone. It was Tata Singapore Airlines, there was British Airways, there was a European consortium, and there was an American consortium of airlines. Montek Singh Ahluwalia and Morgan Stanley under Nainalal Kidwai were looking into this. So there have been a lot of slips and misses for Singapore Airlines and Tatas. And finally, the chickens have come home to roost in 2024. I just look forward to a great airline. I see a lot of change coming in. At the same time, I see very little difference. And I'll explain this statement more clearly in the sense that, it was always known that the Tatas were coming with Singapore Airlines even before the bid got finalized. And that being said, there was a shadow, I won't say a shadow cabinet, but they were planning in the background from September 2021, even before they took over. So they had a transition team, then they had a transformation team, and SIA has had a say in a considerable number of appointments. When you look at the palette of top management, you'll recognize their fingerprints all over. So it's not that they're just coming in today. They've been guiding a lot of the change. The other stuff, the entire old legacy top and middle management have all gone. Over 2,000 cabin crew have taken VRS and retired. So really, you're just working with a brand new set of people. Except pilots, you've almost got an entirely new workforce. I can see there'll be a lot of change in the way that services, training, service delivery, customer handling will take place. And there are no excuses anymore. I think you're going to get a spanking new product very soon. So that's my thoughts on this. Yes.
This is incredible, Sanjay, and I'm so glad that you're with us talking about all this because so much of that I definitely wasn't aware of, and thank you for your thoughts and your insights into this. This is
Well, you'll get it in my next book, which is the history of the Indian aviation, which I've got research from 1925 right down to 2024. So, you're going to get a lot of this stuff coming out there. There, cabinet meeting notes, you'll be surprised to note, and I'm saying this on your show, Vishal, I want to point out, the cabinet had approved Singapore Airlines and Tata. In the cabinet, the PM and the FM had agreed, and so did the finance minister. It was the aviation minister who opposed it and said there's going to be strikes, there's going to be, bloodshed on the roads. We can't let this happen. And it was a coalition government. I don't know if you remember, in those days there were those weak little coalition governments that we had,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
a majority of three, outside support of four, that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
I do
And
remember.
and
Yeah.
this is recorded in the cabinet minutes, huh? By the way.
Makes me wonder what strong influence Mr. Naresh Goyal had on the ministry. Stuff of legends, right? And I'm looking forward to the book, by the way. When are you coming out with it? With the
Well,
book?
it'll be in 25. Yeah, it's sometime in mid 25. But it's going to be a really interesting. I've been interviewing a lot of people over the last year. People who were in touch, who worked for JRD, people, to get a sense, because there's really been nothing of that sort, published in India until now, and I felt that was something I wanted to do. So yeah, I'm
I'll be
cataloging.
one of the
You know,
first people to pre-order it,
yes,
Sanjay,
of
for
course,
sure.
of course. Yeah.
And
So this is it.
now that Singapore Airlines is in the first officer's seat, I would guess, with a 25% stake, how do you think the airline will change?
Couple of things. Let me just share with you. A lot of people, and this is, out of script. I'll just answer. A lot of people are unhappy that Vistara is being subsumed by Air India. To quote you, um, but a lot of people don't even realize that this was something both the owners had decided in 2021 itself, even before any talk or resolution of board came up that will merge. It was already decided, because look at it from a business perspective. You have two owners who are pumping in money in one carrier. It's successful. It's reached a mid level. It's a small level. 70 aircraft today is not a big airline. Okay. Then Singapore also wanted a piece of the pie, Air India, because remember, Air India has the largest international network outside of India. Okay. From India. Number two, Air India also owns AI SATs jointly with Singapore's owners. AI SATS is owned by Temasek and Air India. Temasek is the owner of Singapore Airlines. They control almost 6 or 7 airports ground handling. So that's another thing. They have cargo outlets. You know, People have failed, and I'll say this across the board to whether it's journalists or writers or analysts. And this was when I was still with the union, and still working and flying. And it amazed me that nobody had seen the scope and the landscape that Singapore Airlines and Tata were looking at. I mean, it gives Singapore Airlines and the Tatas, I won't say virtual domination, but it gives them great market access into so many airports where Air India AI stats are already present. That's the second. So the push was really coming from outside. It wasn't inside. So they decided they don't want to contribute to two separate carriers. And this was the best way to bring Singapore Airlines into Air India. And let me tell you this, and this is off the record. I mean, you can dig around and find out the 25% FDI, etc., Singapore Airlines joining in was cleared even before September of 2021. When I say cleared, in principle approval that there would be a foreign partner was made very clear. That it would be Singapore Airlines was also very clear. I was part of the HR committee appointed by the then minister, Mr. Puri, and we dealt with all the employee issues. We took it to the committee, which was headed by Sri Amit Shah, who was a home minister. Employee stock options were discussed, the shares were everything. So all this has been hashed out by the government and the Tatas and their team 19 in 21 and prior. Remember, so it's not that it happened overnight. Vistara was always going to sunset, and it's sad. It's a great carrier. I loved it too. And let's look at it on the other side. The same owners of Vistara are going to bring that kind of quality into Air India. So that's one aspect that I wanted to touch upon, because there's so much that is heard about and not enough people are talking. It was the will of the owners. It's not some guy who just woke up and said, let's shut that airline down. Would you have, would you run two restaurants side by side, serving the same kind of food to the same kind of people, and invest in both? No, you'd merge them and make them one. They're the same. They're just different names, same cuisine, same passenger, same person. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at, you take a flight, for example, to Heathrow or to Paris. Air India has seven, and Vistara has seven. Does it make sense to have two sets of, duty managers, duty officer, traffic assistants at the airport, marketing team, everything? It doesn't make any sense. Same owner, same thing. It's not that one is giving a different value proposition and the other is not. So that's how the owners have looked at it differently. And this allows them, scale. You have one big company which has 275 odd aircraft as of today. Going forward, it's probably going to go to 500 aircrafts in the next 2 years. And that's what they want. They want to have this massive mammoth airline to not only take on Indigo internally, but they're looking more at taking on the Emirates and the Qatars and the Etihads of the world.
That's a great segue for my next question, Sanjay. Do you think the new Air India be effectively able to challenge the ME3 carriers for international traffic out of the country?
Vishal, you'd have to appreciate, unfortunately, Air India has been the airline we all love to hate. I mean, everybody loves to point a finger that Air India didn't do this properly or didn't do that. But if it's a British Airways or an Emirates that does it, nobody ever complains. You won't see a damn thing on Twitter. You won't see it on Instagram or social media or Facebook. But if Air India does even the tiniest drops a pin wrongly, they get lambasted. And that's very sad, because it's our own carrier. It's been built by one of the greatest aviators, in the world has ever seen. So I do believe, that definitely the new Air India will be able to compete with these carriers. Yes, let's accept one thing. I do not see at this current time, and I don't believe they should target that kind of market. Now, for example, if you take an Emirates or you take a Qatar, uh, and you take their Bombay to New York fare, they're upwards of 5, 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs plus, 10 lakhs plus. There's, Dom Perignon, caviar. I think what you have to do is temper your product to your market. Okay. Sure, you've got Emirates passengers who fly out of India, and Emirates pulls out almost the maximum number. Um, is that the large market that you're targeting? First thing. So they will compete. They need to get their new aircrafts. They need to get their refurbished products, and then they need to get their product mix correct. I believe that even if they were to be one step lower, of course, I've heard, the CEO of Air India, Mr. Campbell, talking about how competition is only Etihad, Qatar, and Emirates of the world. But I also like to believe that we have a larger middle class population who would love to travel more frequently to all these routes, point to point. If it's fun, people will go for it. And I see that if I did a Bombay to New York and it was cheaper than, Emirates fare, or on par with them, more or less, I'm sure more Indians would travel Air India than go via the Gulf. So I can see that happening maybe 2 years down the line. Let's understand that we've reset the clocks to zero, and it starts now. You will see over the next, we're in August now. I think by next March, you would see all, first, I'm talking in domestic terms, almost 60 to 70 of the A320s would have the three class configuration, which is the business class, the premium economy, and the economy. So, similar to the Vistara setup, similar to what Air India has planned, the new seats coming in. So you would see that. So the business class and the premium economy domestic would be, competitive and compatible with what Air India's views are for the long term. The second step I see is the Vistara and the Air India frequent flyer programs merging into a brand new product, which I assume they would launch maybe March next year, I think, with a big bang. And also, what they will get, which other people don't have, is they have the Tata New app. They have the entire Tata, array of products from all their companies. So you can see greater rewards and greater points and abilities coming from. I can see the Tatas leveraging the strength of their corporate muscle with, from all their companies in this. And that's going to take, this Air India Vistara combined much higher. I can see Singapore Airlines code shares growing in leaps and bounds because remember, we have a free trade uh, market access with Singapore.
FTA, yeah.
I can, yeah. So we're going to have that FTA. They're going to milk it for what it's worth. You will see point-to-point services from little airports pumping into Singapore, going out into parts of the world that Air India had never gone.
So, do you think to support these point to point routes, new routes, Air India will have to augment its regional fleet to feed traffic into its big hubs of Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore?
That brings a very interesting question of whether Air India should have a regional carrier or not. Now, make no mistake, the next big market for us in India is the regional market, and it's exploding already. You can, I mean, from the grapevine, we already know that Indigo, the big blue, is looking at ramping up its regional fleet. There's already Star Air. We've got Fly 91 that's coming. Al Hind is just announced. I believe there's another airline coming in Tamil Nadu. So you're going to see a lot of small airlines that come in, and that's where the money is. Indigo already flies the ATR. I believe they are considering the 220 as well, the Airbus 220, or they would go with more ATRs. But they're talking of 100 aircraft, 100 additional aircraft purely for their regional routes. Now, why is that? Indigo already is a monopoly carrier with a 62% market share currently, and that's largely all the domestic markets. Uh, you will be amazed to know this. There are about 570 odd points which are not covered by any other carrier, which are covered by Indigo. And this is of early March this year, right? So that means they're a monopoly carrier in those. If I had to remember Peter's words at his the anniversary gig was that Indigo is literally less than an hour away from major airports all across India. So essentially half an hour, 1 hour, any passenger could travel on a long haul, on a flight, whether it's short haul, medium haul, long haul, as in when the long haul starts. That is how Air India will eventually have to be. Now, does Air India need to start a regional carrier? No. Air India could easily make its low cost arm, look at that aspect, maybe bring in another aircraft if they wanted. I don't see that Air India needs to be bothered with getting into that segment right away. Air India has the advantage of having its full service carrier and a low cost carrier operating. So they have, jets. They could easily bring in a smaller aircraft over there if they needed to. That's how I see it going forward because they have the smaller aircrafts. The 737 may not be able to land everywhere that they want to go. Therefore, they may need an ATR or an Airbus 220, something like that. But I do see it happening after they have refurbished their long haul flights. Remember, the meat and drink for Air India is always going to be the long haul international for the simple reason they have first mover advantage and they do not want to squander that by the time Indigo ramps up its domestic muscle to go international. Its XLRs will be coming 25, 26, 27. You should see the 359s. So you're going to see a lot of action on that front. They're
Yeah,
going to fly point to point. So before that,
absolutely.
Air India will be ready. Vishal, this is one thing I didn't really mention, and I don't think too many people have thought about it or asked about it. But there's definitely, going to be at least two IPOs in the near future in the aviation space. Akasa has already indicated that they would like to go to the market by 27, 28. But don't be too surprised if you see an Air India IPO coming up. And I say this because, that's one of the big cornerstones of this entire merger and growth is, of course, bringing world-class aviation. But there's an IPO in the offing. I'd say by 28, for sure, you can see, stuff happening because there's a huge number of aircraft coming. There's growth happening. So I wouldn't hold my breath. It's definitely on the cards, and you heard it here. Please also note that if you've looked at the shareholding pattern of the new Air India, it has 25.1% for Singapore Airlines, and there is SBI Caps who holds a small amount of shares, if you've noticed. Those are the ESOPs given to the employees. So that's just to give you a loop. Yeah.
There are so many layers to this story, and we could talk forever. But for now, we will have to stop here. And thank you for your time, Sanjay.
Yep. Cheers. Thank you for having me. And yes, let's keep tangoing and let's, Indian aviation keep booming. That's what I want to see. We all want to see. Yeah. Thanks so much.
This has been incredible, and I cannot thank you enough for making the time. The more I know about Sanjay and my post show recording call with him, it's almost like I could do an entire show about the man and still not cover him fully. We always have problem of plenty here at the Indian AvGeek, and I had told Sanjay before the show recording that let's aim to keep this within 20-25 minutes, but on the edit table it became impossible for me to cut much. Nonetheless, another incredible show, terrific discussions thanks to him and to you, dear listener. We are now available on YouTube as well, besides Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and all other major podcast apps. And with that, I wish you well and happy flying, my friends.